In 2012, Stephen Kingsmore's team at Children's Mercy Hospital published a proof of concept study that pioneered the use of rapid whole genome sequencing in critically ill newborns. GenomeWeb editor Malika Ashford spoke to Kingsmore about where newborn sequencing stands today and about the slow adoption of genomic medicine.
Dr. Kingsmore, if I were speaking with you 25 years ago, would you have been able to predict how far genomic testing and next generation sequencing in particular has made it into the clinic as of 2025?
No, I don't believe that 25 years ago, if you had asked me, would genomic medicine be a reality today and would it be transformational? I would have said, no, I don't think so. I don't think we could have foreseen what has happened. I don't think we could have foreseen how important the genome is in contributing to health and illness.
Do you remember any particular aha moment when you and your collaborators realized that rapid sequencing could really change the care and the outcomes for sick newborns? Was there like a moment, or was it a gradual realization?
There were a number of aha moments along this journey. So 2007, we decoded, I think it was the 8th human genome in partnership with a Korean group. And it was the first genome, I believe, that got sort of a medical interpretation. And we were dazed and confused because it turned out that this individual, who was apparently healthy, had a lot of recessive traits that they had never been aware of. And that was an aha moment. But it was a good and a bad one, because we realized they were false positive signals. That in fact, the literature, we only found this out about 4 years later, but the literature was incorrect, that people had overestimated pathogenic or disease-causing variation. It wasn't until 2010 when we built the world's first screen for carriers for recessive genetic diseases that we realized that the literature to date was full of error. Now we have databases like GenomeWeb that allow us to identify those false positive signals very easily, but back then we didn't. And so that was an aha moment. And then there was the aha moment when we ran our first rapid genome in a baby, a critically ill baby, in the intensive care unit in Kansas City. And in 3 out of the 4 babies that we decoded, we found a genetic cause for their presentation. And, you know, if it had happened 1 time out of 4, it would have been shocking. But 3 times out of 4, it completely blew our minds. We suddenly realized either we're the luckiest twin causers in the world, or this is a generalizable thing. And now we all know that it's a generalizable thing. And in particular, we found that dominant disorders were more prevalent than recessives, which was completely counterintuitive at that time.
What were some of the greatest challenges you remember facing in developing this field and this practice? Was it technological, or more about galvanizing interest, raising money, conducting the right kind of studies to demonstrate clinical utility?
The biggest difficulty was just how long it took. I mean, we are now 14 years, it's now 14 years later, and only about 3 or 4% of the babies who would benefit from a rapid diagnostic genome sequence will get it this year. And that's in the US. Around the rest of the developed world, it's an even smaller proportion. This is still the most underutilized life-saving technology on the planet. That's phenomenally frustrating, just how slow medicine is to change, despite the fact that there's now overwhelming evidence that you can expect every second baby to yield useful information, and that about 2/3 of the time, it changes how you'll care for the baby during their hospitalization, and that you will probably save the system tens of thousands of dollars by doing this at time of admission rather than waiting for a couple of weeks until you go, yes, we're stumped, we're not sure what's going on, and then using the technology as a last resort.
Yeah, that's a great segue, actually, because I want to maybe talk about the present and the future. Federal research funding is not really the same universe that it was even a year and a half or 2 years ago. So, do you have any wisdom that you can share for present and future investigators hoping to translate, the wealth of the human genome into real clinical benefit for patients?
So first of all, I think that great science will be funded. It doesn't matter what the pay line is, great science will always be funded. And so people shouldn't freak out too much in terms of, well, the budget's less than it has been. Great science always gets funded. It takes persistence, it takes dedication, but it always has. We have ups and downs. So it's something that you've got to want to do and be passionate about it, and you've got to be persistent. I think the new thing is that it's really important to be entrepreneurial. It's really important not to think that the federal government is the sole funding source. Maybe we've been, over-reliant on a sort of a monolithic concept when there are very diverse sources of funding for good ideas. And people just need to be much more entrepreneurial in thinking that through, whether it's philanthropy, whether it's collaborating with industry, whether it's reaching out to foundations. There is a great shortage of fresh, smart ideas, and there's huge opportunity.
Is there anything that you're particularly excited about, looking toward the horizon for either the newborn and pediatric diagnostic space or in general?
Yeah, so if we focus in on the area that we've been most focused on for the last decade or more, which is critically ill newborns and infants and children. We now have 18 states who have approved Medicaid coverage policies. And so that's happened relatively quickly, so over the last 2 or 3 years. And I would anticipate that that will continue so that we have just about every state with a policy. And that in turn, that will result in reimbursement. It's not yet, but, the momentum is there. And we're seeing this around the world. The UK is a little bit ahead of us. Other countries are thinking very hard about how they can provide rapid diagnostic genome sequencing as a national service. So I'm very hopeful that that will happen. And I think that's the tip of the iceberg. It's the tip of the iceberg to broad use of genome sequencing in driving pediatric care. So we start with the sickest and the highest acuity because the economics work, but the utility is not magical to that setting. And so I anticipate that a genome will become a routine part of pediatric healthcare increasingly over the next decade or 2 decades, to the point where we will look back and go, how could we ever have practiced medicine without having genome information? I think we also need to mature. Hitherto, we've had this idea that the genome is kind of like the word of God, that it's immutable, it doesn't get it wrong. But honestly, the genome is information related to risk. It's not declarative, it's not definitive. It should be taken together with everything else that we do in medicine in terms of confirmatory testing, taking a good history, doing a good physical examination, that only in combination with the practice of medicine does a genome make sense. And we've had this naive idea that a genome alone is declarative. It's not even in common, highly penetrant diseases. I'm just going to say one more thing, and that is that um, the whole therapeutic universe is changing dramatically. And that's the next big thing, is that most genetic diseases hitherto have had almost no precision medicines to go alongside a precision diagnosis. And that's something that, thanks largely to FDA innovation, but also due to the pharmaceutical industry realizing this, we're in the early stages of a revolution in terms of new therapy development.